The last episode of A Handmaid's Tale leaves us with so many questions, but I think the biggest one is what is going on with Wharton and Serena and why did he let her leave? We're going to get into all of it, but make sure you subscribe if you want more Handmaid's Tale analysis. But before we talk about it, do you recognize this book, Woman in the Window? Or maybe you've seen the movie. I have the craziest news about this book. As so many of you guys know, I got a book deal for my family vlogging psych thriller You Watch in Silence. It comes out in November. Of course, you can reserve a copy now at BNN, and that would help me so much. But I have news that I didn't think I would have in my entire author career, let alone my debut book. Because the author of this book, AJ Finn, read my book to give a blurb, which is like the quotes that go on the cover of this book. Like for Woman in the Window, Gillian Flynn, who did Gone Girl, gave a quote. And I love this book when it came out. I mean, I love it still, but it is such an honor. And honestly, I'm flabbergasted that AJ Finn said yes to reading it. And this is what he had to say about it. He called it bewitching, a dark-hearted, full-blooded thriller, the sort of potent potion that Riley Sager and Stacey Willingham might brew up. Part psychological suspense, part is it or isn't it horror, and altogether likely to spook you off of social media. You might watch in silence, but you'll do it through your fingers. Needless to say, this is one of the coolest moments of my career thus far. And if you liked Woman in the Window, maybe you'll like You Watch in Silence. Again, you can reserve your copy now, or if you can't afford a hardcover, you can request an early digital copy on NetGalley. My publisher is giving away early copies for review. So maybe you'll get to read it before anyone else. Now back to A Handmaid's Tale. I know a lot of people were expecting something from Nick this episode. A lot of people said he was going to redeem himself with this Mayday operation, but I don't know what it's going to take for people to truly understand who Nick is as a person. It's apparently going to take more than Nick just outright saying who he is as a person, because he has. You don't even need to look towards his actions, just look at his words. He outright said the only reason he was ever good was for June, that now that he can't have June, he does not care about being good. He never claimed to be part of the resistance. Every act that he ever did for the resistance in the show was always linked to June. And when June said, "You're just like them," he didn't say, "No, I'm not. I hate Gilead." He said, "Yeah, and you love me. So what does that make you?" And a lot of people still stand by him. Even after that, they're saying, oh, he was just angry. He was just ashamed. He was saying things that he didn't mean. That's not how he really feels. He just feels so bad. Okay, well, here we are a couple weeks later. We're seeing Nick again, and he doesn't seem wrought with guilt to me. He doesn't seem like he's suffering so much from his actions. He's going to a wedding, he's giving a speech, he's talking about his incoming newborn, going along with Gilead like he always does, because guys, Nick is not some master resistor. Nick was never part of the resistance. He never wanted to be part of the resistance. I even had a few comments that were like a little aggressive and were like, you're gonna be embarrassed about this. You should have waited to the end until you said anything about Nick. He's gonna redeem himself and blah, blah, blah. And you're going to be really embarrassed, which first of all, I wouldn't be. I wouldn't be embarrassed to be wrong about a movie or TV show. I have been making content like this for years. I've been wrong a lot. I enjoy making theories about books and movies and TV, and I'm going to be wrong sometimes, and that's fine. But putting that aside, if Nick decides to join the resistance, and I've said in my videos, I think he might. I think the timing of this and how early they revealed that Nick didn't care, I think that they might have him do something for the resistance towards the end of the season. But if he does do that, I still won't be wrong in what I've said about Nick up until this point, because up until this point, he has never done anything to actually fight Gilead of his own heart, of his own values. He says that himself. If he joins the resistance, that'll be because he changed his mind, because he actually decided to do something selfless, to prioritize his values over his own selfishness. But that won't make his behavior up until this point not selfish. He has shown immense selfishness. And I don't think he's pro-Gilead. I don't think he enjoys Gilead. That's never what I'm saying in my videos. I'm just saying he's someone who doesn't care enough to fight Gilead, and he would rather maintain his life, his station, what he's got going on, than risk anything to fight the place that he helped build. And his desire to maintain his life over risking anything to actually help other people, that's consistent through the series. It's not just this season. It's why he treated Eden and his current wife the way that he does. He's not the kind of guy to do the honorable thing. He's the kind of guy to prioritize whatever he wants. Will that change? Maybe, but it won't mean that he was selfless all along. All this analysis about Nick up until this point and what he did to build up Gilead, that all stands no matter what he chooses to do moving forward. Putting that aside though, I did have another correct prediction about Aunt Lydia. If you don't remember or you haven't been watching my series this final season, I said from the very first episode that I thought Aunt Lydia was getting a redemption arc this season. Now, I personally don't think this absolves her of everything that she did. Whenever I say redemption arc, people tend to think that that's what it means, that I think they are redeemed as people. Redemption arc is a narrative turn. It just means that she has shifted in what she's decided to do. Obviously, in the real world, nothing that she did would be forgivable. But I do think it highlights how she is so different from Serena, that she is not half as narcissistic as Serena, and she has a lot more conviction in her belief system than Serena. And I think she always has. For as godly as Serena claims to be, she's never actually living the faith. She's always living in whatever makes her feel the best or gives her the most power. Aunt Lydia, for all her faults, really does believe in her religion, in God, and can see that this place that Gilead is clearly not in God's image. It is a hypocritical hellscape. And now that she has all the evidence of that, she's willing to change course, which not only makes her more honorable than Serena, it kind of makes her more honorable than Nick, because unlike Nick, she will allow herself to feel guilty for what she's done and make an actual change about it. She did make a sacrifice to do the right thing because this was really risky, especially with an eye present there. She just let these handmaids go. Who knows how that is going to end up for her, but that is her showing actual repentance. But I also got to give credit to June. She was really smart in the way that she approaches Lydia. She's smart in the way she approaches most people, but she really knew to speak to Lydia on her level and ask her, is this honestly what you think God wants for us? And is this what you want for your girls? June knew that Lydia could be moved by her convictions. I mean, she's seen moments of this in the past. She's seen real empathy from Lydia. She's seen Aunt Lydia admit that she doesn't like certain things about Gilead. She could see her values in there enough to be like, look, this isn't what you want. Granted, I do think this only worked because of everything that Lydia had experienced up until this point. Seeing all those handmaids in Jezebel's and then seeing them slaughtered in that way, that was obviously deeply traumatic for Aunt Lydia. I could see her breaking down in that moment. I think the only reason she didn't break down is because she heard that Janine had made it out. And I think she, like she always does, she took that as her little message from God. Like, this was horrible, but my Janine made it out. That had to be for a reason. But then she goes to see Janine, sees that she's being tortured, essentially. And she needed to have her existential crisis, her crisis of faith, to really be open to what June was saying. And then she had very genuine guilt. Anne Dowd is such a talent in that moment where she just collapses and allows herself to feel all the mistakes that she's made up until this point. Felt very authentic on screen. Again, doesn't absolve her. But knowing that Anne Dowd is reprising her role in the Testaments as Aunt Lydia, I am very curious to see how her character shapes up in the next show. But the character that I really want to discuss from this episode is Serena, because man, I called that one too. I did not trust Commander Wharton, but I also did not think that this would happen so swiftly. But I didn't trust him because he was saying such different things to Serena and to Nick. With Nick, he seemed such like a die-hard Gilead fan, deeply conservative. And then with Serena, he was seeming open to change, embracing New Bethlehem. And he could not hold those two incongruent views in his head at once. I always thought he was just telling Serena what she wanted to hear, which he confirmed, by the way. He said it himself. I bent for you. I took on all your progressive views, but he did not mean it. And even June could see that he didn't mean it when she told Serena, like, you are subjugating yourself for this man. And Serena was like, no, he's different from Fred. And June was like, wasn't Fred different from Fred pre-Gilead? Which is just the absolute truth. Talked about this before already too, but Fred was all about Serena's independence and autonomy and really admired her pre-Gilead. In fact, in my character breakdown of Fred, I highlight that that is the wife that he wanted to have. He never even wanted a submissive wife. That wasn't his personality. And so if Fred could be who he was, 4 years and then change on a dime. Why is Serena so willing to believe that this man that she's known 4 weeks, couple months tops, is telling her the truth? Especially in an environment where the second you agree to marry that man, he owns you, he controls everything that you do. How could she be so dumb? She asks this herself. She is not a dumb individual. Serena's a smart and effective woman. Not an ethical one, but an intelligent one. So how did she not see this coming? But the answer is simple, because if you do not unpack the patriarchy from your heart and mind, you will always be susceptible to the control of the patriarchy. And Serena never unpacked her relationship to patriarchy, being an alt-right conservative Christian woman. Had she truly unpacked it, she never would have ended up in New Bethlehem. She never would have been giving Gilead a second chance. I mean, she was living a fairly happy life pre-New Bethlehem. She was single, but she was doing things for her community that actually gave her value, and it was a quiet life, but it was nice. And then Commander Lawrence came to meet her and said, you could be the voice of New Bethlehem. You could be the face of it. And of course, she just can never shy away from that power. She is the kind of woman who seeks power, the kind of woman who wants to be in a position of leadership. And that alone is like not a toxic trait in Serena. In a woman who has divorced herself from the patriarchy, it could have been a very positive trait. She could have championed causes that really do matter. She could have written books and advocated for so many things, even if her focus was the fertility crisis, which was a legit problem in this world. She could have been an environmentalist. That was the real cause of the fertility crisis. There was no reason that the answer to that needed to be some alt-right nightmare. It could have been like, let's fix our environment. So why did she choose to be a leader in a movement that mostly advocated silencing women when she didn't want to be silenced? Why was she going around and writing in her books and going to public speaking events and saying women need to be in the home when she didn't want to be in the home? That wasn't her. That was never her personality. Why advocate for it? Because if she didn't, and she just went around and advocated for her actual values, her actual beliefs, if she had fought for something that was not Christian and conservative, she would not have been the perfect Christian conservative woman. She would not have had the identity that she so craved, and she would not have the approval of men, which her religion taught her from a very young age to crave. As much as she craved leadership, she also craved a husband, she also craved a family. That was something she was taught from a very young age to want, but also to want it in a way that the men in her life approve of her. She wanted that approval. And if she was too independent, too autonomous, too threatening to men, and none of them wanted to marry her, that would have been the biggest failing ever. There's nothing worse you can do as a conservative Christian woman than to not be wanted by any man. To not be chased by a man was to be invalid. She couldn't have that. So if she was going to have both worlds, then she needed a man to approve of her while she was doing this work, which Fred did. She did actually, for a while, pre-Gilead, have the best of both worlds. It's a harsh irony that in pursuing her cause so much and actually getting it off the ground, she lost the best of both worlds. And even as Fred passed and she started to enjoy her single life, she never unpacked this desire that she had to be wanted by men. Even as she's saying, you know, in New Bethlehem, I want to be single, I want to write, I want to focus on my work. The very second, the first man who gives her any kind of attention tells her that she's great, she's so attractive, and she's so worthy, she folds in a second. I've said it before, I'll say it again, she's the ultimate pick-me. Commander Wharton made everything that she wanted to do and who she was as a person valid. She needed that validation so bad. And she was always susceptible to falling victim to any man who was going to give her that kind of attention because she had never asked herself why she needs that so bad. And it's one thing to want to get married and to want to have a family. Women of all religions and political beliefs want that. Men want that too. It's so normal to want love and companionship, but if you look at Serena's history, she never wanted love and companionship. Those were never her driving forces. She didn't even love Fred for most of their marriage. Their marriage was so contentious, so vile. They were awful to each other. She knew it, and yet she continued to go back to him, even after he was arrested. In Canada, she would go back to him because he validated her, not because she loved him or because he made her feel loved. They were so incompatible post Gilead, and she still wanted him. And I'd be shocked if Serena ever unpacks this, because I don't think that she's capable of true change. Even after this experience with Commander Wharton, I feel like she would still be susceptible to a new man's attention. She just doesn't do the inner work to have real growth, and we see that at her wedding because she's trying to do the right thing, right, guys? She goes up to the handmaids and she wants to let them know how important they are, but then she gets on this rant about how she used to have a handmaid and they were both awful to each other. She had the audacity to say, we both did horrible things to each other, as if there was any equality in that relationship, as if June was not just a victim fighting back against her abuser. If Serena was ever going to make real change, Serena would have to admit that she did downright evil things, and she does not want to see herself as that. She always wants to see herself as the savior, as a good person. Although I do have to give her just the slightest bit of credit for actually changing some of her views, because the way that she reacted to that handmaid was very genuine, I think. Actual empathy. She is capable of a little bit of it. She may not be capable of admitting her own past mistakes, but she is capable of saying, I do not want to do this again, and I am horrified seeing these women hurt. I do think she learned just a little bit from her experience with the Wheelers, just how awful the life of a handmaid truly is, how unimaginably painful it is to have your child ripped from you. And it's horrific that she had to experience it herself to be horrified about it, but that's what Serena is, that's who she is. And it may be a low bar, but she is disgusted by the whole handmaid system. She is horrified when this woman is referred to as a vessel. She says she's not a vessel, she's a person. She asks her real name. She finally sees the handmaids as they are, actual human beings, when before, when she had June, she mostly chose to see the handmaids as subhuman. I think it actually helped her separate herself from the horrific things she was doing. She treated them like they truly deserved to be treated this way. They had made mistakes. This was, their retribution with God. It was what it was. And she cannot see these women like that anymore. Granted, I also think there's some selfishness wrapped up in her reaction. One, I think that having a handmaid in the house made her feel so inadequate because, like she said, I'm fertile. Why do you need this other woman in this household? I can have children. It was probably on some level a reminder of Fred and all his infidelity. And I also think she just felt so stupid in that moment, and that was contributing to her very emotional reaction. But she also did have very real concern for that handmaid. But the scene really also gave me so much insight into Wharton's character, which again, I think we're all wondering, why even let Serena go? And I'll get to that. But before, I said that I thought Wharton's main motivation for marrying Serena was he wanted to secure control. He had Nick under his control. He was marrying Serena, so he had the most control over New Bethlehem. They were the two prominent figures in New Bethlehem besides Lawrence. And I do still think on some level that was true, but I'm also seeing now just how similar Wharton is to Serena. He's really a mirror for Serena's character, and in that way is kind of everything she deserves. Because yeah, I do think he craves power like Serena. I do think he craves control and to make his vision come to life. Again, that is partially why he went after Serena and why he went after Nick. But I also think he is excellent at lying to himself in the same way Serena is. And just like her, he tells himself that he is genuinely a good person. I honestly don't even think that he believes that he tricked Serena. I think his reaction to her is genuine. He's shocked. He did not know that she would be upset this way. I think if he was trying to trick her, he would have done it a lot more subtly. He wouldn't have brought a handmaid home on their wedding night. And the truth is, if you go back to his and Serena's conversations, you can kind of see why he thought this, because they never spoke actual facts, actual concrete plans. They always talk to each other in this weird idealistic way, we'll make our vision of Gilead come to life. We will clean up Gilead. And Commander Wharton meant that. He just did not mean it in the way that Serena meant it, in the progressive way she meant it. And I think he thought he was bending towards Serena's progressive nature, but that she also held the main core values of Gilead. And so he was willing to bend a little bit because they still had the same core beliefs belief. Because Wharton also really does want to fix Gilead. It's just that he doesn't want to do it in a way that makes it better for the women in Gilead. He just thinks there's a lot of hypocrisy in Gilead. He is like true Christian, deeply conservative. He's from DC. And as much as he wants to follow the original plan of Gilead, he doesn't like how corrupt it's become. He is disgusted by things like Jezebels, but he's not disgusted by the system of Gilead, which is why he says to Serena that, like, he bent on all her progressive political beliefs, but he will not bend on honoring God. And he sees the handmaids as the way to do that. He sees the original plan of Gilead as the plan of God. This is his calling, to make as many babies as possible. And he wants to do that with Serena, but, like, why not add a handmaid to it? Isn't this what we're supposed to do? We're supposed to be as fruitful as we can be. And I do think that he thought Serena was on board because they would talk so much about how they wanted to have such a big family. He thought they were going to utilize all their resources to do that. That's why he says, you're just one person. So Serena is caught off guard in this moment, but I also think he actually is too. And his belief in himself that he truly is a good man, despite all of this, is why he decides to let Serena go. He's shocked by her rant. He's shocked that she would refer to him as something to survive. He says it. I'm not something to survive. I am a good man. And he is going to show her that by saying, fine, go. I'm not going to force you to stay here. Of course, he can also do that pretty easily because he understands that in Gilead, there's nowhere to go. She's his wife now. She's going to have to come back eventually. I think he's hoping that she'll walk away. She'll calm down. She'll realize he really is a good man. They'll work it out. So there is some poetic justice in the fact that Serena married somebody who was exactly like Serena a few years ago. Somebody who was living the lifestyle of Gilead and lying to themselves at the same time, that they were doing the right thing, that this was God's calling, that they were a good person, and now she gets to marry this person and see how horrific that belief system truly is. If you're excited for the next episode, again, make sure you subscribe, and don't forget you can either reserve an early copy of You Watched in Silence at BNN, or you can request an early digital copy from my publisher on NetGalley.